Welcome to a very special episode of Cosmic Road, where we are joined by the one and only Nick Harrison. Welcome to the show, Nick.
How are we doing?
Doing great, man. I'm very excited to talk to you. Now, Nick is one of those very special people that can invite UFOs in, like Chris Bledsoe and some others, and they come. And I've seen him do this. We went to a skywatch just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and he was bringing just bucket loads of UFOs in, and it was just an incredible night. It was at a place that I've told you about before, a place of high strangeness where they normally have UFOs. But I've seen the sorts of activity they have because I've been there before. And we saw that later in the evening. The stuff that was low on the horizon, that was the sort of stuff that they had the last time. But the stuff that we saw in the sky, way up, just flying all over the place, doing crazy stuff, that is what Nick brought to the table, I'm pretty sure. Do you feel like that's an accurate assessment, or what's your take on it?
Yeah. So, I mean, the stuff that I typically see is, they look like stars and they're up, typically high, way higher than any planes. And, there's no planes on the radar or anything like that. And that's, that's in my experience, every time they always say that that's them, that's what it is. And that was unique, I guess, from what you were saying. Y'all don't typically see that kind of action, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that was a gangbusters night. No, that was amazing. That was probably our best skywatch ever, man. And it was all because of you. And it was, thank you. It was so cool, guys. We had, pockets of us. We're all looking at the lights in the sky, moving around, doing their thing. And we're all like in our individual pockets, just, really excited. And then for whatever reason, at a certain point, we're all looking at one constellation directly ahead of us. I can't remember why we were looking at it, but all of us were looking at the same thing at the same time. And there was this big bright flash, this big, huge pulse right from that constellation. And we just all went crazy. Oh my God. And, we couldn't believe it. It was really obvious, very clear, communication, whatever it was, demonstration from the phenomenon that I think was invited by Nick. And so, yeah, just an incredible experience. And and then we went inside and we had fajitas. And if you can have a UFO skywatch capped off by some tasty fajitas, that's the way to go. But yeah, so how long have you been interacting with the phenomenon and able to do this? What brought you into this?
So really, it all kind of started whenever back in 2022, I had got into like meditating and just really trying to explore consciousness and whatnot. And it really started with the gateway tapes. Are you familiar with those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have the gateway process on my computer. I've only gone a few into it, but
yeah, so I just had, I don't know, a desire to look into remote viewing and exploring consciousness. And I've been listening to podcasts about Dolores Cannon and just all this metaphysical stuff that I wasn't really interested in at all. And I had just, went down that path, and I did one of the gateway tapes. And afterwards, I was overcome with emotion at the end of it. It was just like this feeling of love. And it was just coming from somewhere else that I just didn't really understand how some sort of meditation or guided meditation could elicit some sort of emotional response from me, I guess. And so that just kind of gave me the kick that I needed to go down that road further. And looking back, I realized that I think that was my guides, giving me something that was tangible that I had never experienced before, just in reality, to kind of follow the path that I was on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does.
And so that led me to a little bit of, I guess, full disclosure, on the psychedelic side. I'm a bit of a psychonaut myself, I would say, and pretty experienced in that realm, but it had never been in the sense that I was using psychedelics to, I guess, learn something. It was just more of a fun fun thing to do. And I was at a hotel working in Phoenix, and I decided that, you know what, I've got some free time and I'm going to meditate, but do a little bit of mushrooms at the same time. And, but with the intention of like wanting to know the truth of like what we are, what we're doing here. And just like, I was really just humbled myself and was like, I'm open to, you know, my reality being shattered just because I want to know the truth about whatever the truth may be. Right. And when I did that, long story short, I ended up like having that same overcoming of emotion feeling that I had after the Gateway tapes, except it came with um, an internal voice of like, I don't know, it came with all the love and my own conscious like thoughts saying that like, you figured it out, help him. And it was almost like I was walking into a room of people that realized that I was beginning to understand that there was something else going on. And like, they like threw all the papers off the desk, and it was like, I don't know, a collective me walking into someone else's conversation, if that makes sense. And they were telling me that like not to be afraid, because it was just an overwhelming, the feeling was just so foreign, but it was like all love. And like I had tears rolling down my face, and I was smiling and laughing like hysterically, not from the mushrooms, but but it was just, it was startling. You know, it was more of a, if there was any fear at all, it was just the fear of the unknown, just because it was just such a new experience for me. And basically what I ended up doing since then, I said there's something strange going on, and I hit record on my what was it, on the voice memos on my phone, and I said I'm just going to repeat everything that is coming in my mind out loud. And so I started to do that, and after a few minutes I realized that I was having a conversation. I was answering questions, and then I would respond with the next thing that came into my mind. And that response was in terms of like you and we and us. So I would ask a question, and then I would answer myself, but it was like, we want to help you, and we love you, and like these things like that. And I was putting two and two together in terms of like, whenever I'm thinking to myself in my own mind, I don't think in terms of we and you and us. It's always, you know, an I or a me, right?
I always use the royal we.
Yeah. Well, not all of us are royal, but no, it was, I think honestly it is a good practice to think that way, to be honest. I've since all of my experiences, I tend to think that way too, because it does, it's more of a inclusive if we all are connected in one anyway. So I do like using it that way now as well. But yeah, I began to understand that there was the only way, the means of communication that was taking place, or the contact that had just happened, was through my own like my own conscious, I guess, my own inner dialogue. It was in my own voice, but I was able to discern a different being or beings at the same time. So I explored that. I started asking questions, and I asked who they were. And they said that they were beings of light, or light beings, that were working with humanity's consciousness to evolve and ascend. And that this is day one. And I'm like, okay, this is crazy. And but I knew that it was real. It was the most real and like meaningful, emotional, you know, experience that I had ever had. And that went on for, you know, a few days. And then I started researching into some of the things that they had mentioned to me. I also asked if they had some of the things whenever I'm asking direct questions back and forth, like if you go and read some of the transcripts that I have, I'll ask a question, but the question has more depth and intent behind it. Like whatever I'm meaning by the question, I asked, do you have a name? But like what I was meaning was, do you have a name that all of you would go by, or that I would know or understand or recognize? And interestingly enough, the name that they said was Elohim. And at the time, I didn't really have any real context or reference for at least the religious side of what that word could mean or did mean. And that kind of, whether I went down the rabbit hole and searching on Telegram, and whenever I searched that word, I came across some other channels that mentioned the word Elohim being like higher dimensional beings, essentially, and specifically connected to Pleiadians in general. And so I started researching, down that road, and learning what I could here and there about them, and just trying to put two and two together and understand what I was experiencing, because it wasn't like they were just in my head talking all the time. It was kind of like I had to sit down, really focus on it, and then I would kind of know whenever the connection was made, because I would hear some like almost dial-up type electronic sounds, and it was like almost like there was like the connection being established, is the only way I could describe it. And then I'm like, okay, and then I would just start talking, and then just documenting it all back and forth. And everything that I've documented up until now is just recordings of those conversations, and then doing transcripts of everything for the past 3 years, I guess.
That's amazing, Nick. Do you know Peter Maxwell Slattery? Have you ever heard of him?
No.
He's an experiencer in Australia. He has a place called Jaya Sanctuary, where he does C5 a lot, and he invites people to come. And he's able to do some of what you do, invite the beings in and the craft in, and they come. And he talks a lot about the Elohim.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have time and if you're interested, you might want to seek out some of his material on the Elohim. Might give you some insight into what these guys are. Of course, I'm sure that different people have different perspectives on what the Elohim are. And all of your pages of information that you have, that you transcribed from these conversations, what have you learned? What's the bigger picture? Can you tell us what's going on?
It seems like that at the very least, Earth is definitely some sort of school for souls, if you will. And we are definitely here to learn lessons and develop, consciousness to a point to where we can essentially combine all of the information and lessons that we've lived in every life that we've lived, and the wisdom of all of that into one like ascended body. And they are assisting with the collective to get us all to that point.
And what is the overall goal?
Well, that ascension goal.
Once we've ascended, then what?
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that. I think that the whole idea is to get humanity to a point to where we can get out of the backyard and be like a responsible race, and begin to like interact with the rest of the universe and the other beings that become a galactic civilization, essentially. And we can't necessarily do that now in the form and consciousness that we are, if we're still, fighting the frivolous battles that we are amongst ourselves, essentially.
So they're, working with people or through people like you to help spread this message, or how do you see it?
Well, maybe a little bit. Certainly, there's definitely some information that they've given me that seems to be not only for me, if that makes sense. They expect that I talk about it, or that others will hear it, and that it will be, mind opening and expanding for others. Not necessarily that that's like my job or anything like that, but I think just like how sightings, for instance, can kind of open people's minds to allowing, knowing that there's more out there in the universe, things like that, experiences like that are people are allowed to see and be interacted with, are, I think, for the purposes of opening people's minds and accepting and growing and that kind of stuff. Like, that's why they're happening. And they definitely said that they are going to increase and continue as we progress over the next few years, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. If they didn't want us to see them, I don't think we'd see them. And, if they didn't want you to invite them in, they wouldn't come. Right.
Exactly. And that's the whole reason why they've got lights on them to begin with. I think if they didn't want to be seen, then, they wouldn't be. And I really think that also kind of discredits a lot of the, secret military black ops crafts and stuff too. Like, you're not flying around your B-2 stealth bomber with FAA lights on it, or, just anything like that. If the military doesn't want you to see something, then you're definitely not going to.
So what about abductions? Did you ever ask them about abductions? What's that all about?
No, I haven't actually. I have not, at least my guides, and we didn't even get to that point. That where I came to the understanding. I would like to touch on that first a little, just so that everybody understands, I guess, how I came to understand who and what, I guess, I've been communicating with, I guess. Because at first it was really just kind of like I know there's this other intelligence that is communicating with me through my mind, documenting it all that. I think some people would be like, well, I would be asking all these questions. I was just satisfied with knowing that it was happening. But essentially, I did a lot of research, and I decided to go to a isolation tank, float tank, and I had meditated, talked to them the night before that, and I had asked them specifically where they were from, and they said we're from the Pleiades, but you knew that already. And they like were making a joke that you knew that, but like I never asked the direct question. And I've noticed that if I don't ask specific direct questions, sometimes they don't give me specific and direct answers either. And I think part of at least the process for us has been, me and my learning through all this has been finding the right questions to ask. But anyway, they told me that where they were from, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go get all the answers, because if I can really focus, I can probably get a lot of information in this float tank. So I did that, and I asked them specifically who they were in relation to me. I was like, okay, so you're from the Pleiades, but like, what's our relationship? Why is this even happening? Why do we have this sort of connection? And they said specifically that they were my guides, my spirit guides or whatever. And I had only learned about guides in general between, in the last 6 months or so, before I had even asked that question. So them answering that way, like if they would have told me that whenever it first happened, I wouldn't have known what that was. But because I kind of went down those rabbit holes and found other people's information that resonated and seemed like it seemed like the same type of information that I was getting. I was just putting two and two together and cross-referencing things, and they said that they were my guides, and that kind of made it click in my head that, okay, well, if that whole dynamic is real, that means that I probably know these guys essentially, that somehow if they're guiding me, we knew each other before I got into this incarnation, and somehow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
And that became apparent, and it was a funny moment for us because I realized that there's things that I know that, or that they know that I don't know, and that I don't remember. But now that I understand that I don't remember, it was like humorous, and they started laughing with me, and they said, "We can't wait for you to remember." So
I bet you can't wait to remember.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, but just knowing that there's things that you don't remember is that are like existential, I guess, is a pretty strange, I guess, paradigm shift.
Okay, so I've got to ask. So these are your guides. So when you're seeing the lights in the sky, the UFOs, are they structured craft? What are those things? I mean, is it a flying saucer? Can you theoretically fly around in a flying saucer with your spirit guide?
I would say, based on from what I understand, so I think it's important to establish that there's different technological and spiritual levels of beings. So you've got more 3D beings that are the ones that, let's say, the ones that actually crash on Earth are more primitive. Maybe not primitive to us, but primitive in the scale of beings that kind of can curate reality spaces and whatnot, the higher dimensional beings, you know what I mean?
Elohim, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, when you've got crashes and things like that, or and grays and whatnot, and a handful of other beings like the one in Brazil and even the Roswell crash, right? I would say that those kinds of beings are less developed than, say, the Elohim groups, which, from what I understand, are like the Pleiadians, Arcturians, Syrians, and so on. They've got a bit more capabilities when it comes to their technology. So I think that distinction is important. And not only do they operate on a higher dimension and density, I think that they also have physical crafts that they use to interact with our reality as well, and even theirs. So yeah, I do think that both things can be true, but knowing who and what is interacting, at least in our current time period, I think it's mostly those guys.
That's fascinating, Nick. So tell me about the Pleiadians. Are they actually from the Pleiades sector? Who are these guys?
So I do want to make another caveat. A lot of my understanding and I guess back knowledge or just factual things are not all learned directly from my guides specifically. A lot of the things that they've told me are more, spiritual in nature. The only real specifics that they've gave me are like kind of stuff about the pyramids, and then just potentially like some physical areas and things that have been going on in our world. But a lot of my understanding and backstory that I've come to, let's say, adopt as a foundation for my understanding of a lot of the big picture Pleiadian information, has come through Cab from the family of Tegeta. You've heard of them,
Yeah,
I believe,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I actually, well, whenever I was in the float tank, I came to realize that since they were my guides, I was like, so y'all know everything about me, all of my family, all of the, you know, the things that I've been researching, the people that I was like, y'all already know everything that I'm looking at, essentially. And they were like, yeah, basically. And I was like, okay, so what about this? What about that? And I had asked them about Cab and Judith, his mother, and hit Judith. She gets message is kind of, I would say, I'm nowhere near her level by any means, but she talks to her guides telepathically, and I think she does it all through automatic writing, essentially. Well, not automatic. They're talking to her and she's writing it down, kind of thing. I'm not the only way. I've got terrible handwriting, and I was figured I'll just say it all out loud and transcribe it. But she's been doing on a much higher level this kind of thing for, I think, since like 2012 or something. And what I love about her and Cab's information is that the consistency of that single source and I don't know what the right word is, but the information that they've provided, it corroborates with itself. Like it's a building. All the information is kind of built on a whole story narrative group of people, and it all kind of not counter, but I'm lost for words, but the whole of their information has been consistent from when it started, and the information that they provide seems to be very consistent across the board with itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
And I'm not saying that they're the end all be all by any means, but I had my own experience with my guides that I knew was the most true and real thing that I've ever experienced. I read some of their information, and the wording and the cadence and the way that the information was written, it seemed as if it was coming from a similar place, right? And it resonated with me. And they even used a lot of the same just phrasing, like my guides a lot of times whenever we would end a conversation, they would say, we love you so, with the so at the end, right? And that was, I saw that in their messages as well. And I was like, well, that's interesting that I'd never even heard of these people and their messages or anything like that. And then I had my experience first, and then I read these other people's messages from Pleiadians as well, and they're ending their sentences with the same thing that my totally separate experiences were being ended with as well.
Yeah, that's
so incredible. I'm like, okay, so I've been taking, everything that's similar and kind of putting it all together in my own understanding, and they just have a wealth of knowledge that I read a lot of it and I'm like, that resonates, that makes sense. And just throughout this whole experience as well, it's not like they'll kind of come in sometimes and confirm things for me, where it's not necessarily a boom direct communication, but I'll be like in the middle of a thought, thinking or coming to a conclusion about something, and then I'll get like a feeling of like an external feeling, or just like, yes, you're on the right track, that's it. And in that way, they're able to kind of impart intuitive understandings to me without directly having that whole conversation. Like I can read someone else's information and they can confirm a whole concept or idea rather than have to explain all of that idea to me.
Okay, I think I got that somewhat. So the Pleiadians, you see them as more spiritual and less alien?
So they're I don't know how to describe that then.
like higher dimensional beings?
They're definitely higher dimensional. They're definitely, well, I don't know. If you define alien as anything that's not from Earth, then yes, technically that they're not from here. According to, Cab and the family of Tegeta, they say, actually, this is an interesting caveat on where they live. In a higher dimension, evidently, the stars themselves are like planets. So they live on the stars. But from our perspective, in this dimension, that's not something that would be possible.
So the Pleiadians are star-based beings, or do they live on both stars and planets? Or are they exclusively living on stars?
I think, let's say in the seventh dimension, a star and the reality, the physicality of it is not, it's not like it could be like Earth. Okay. Like in a higher dimension, a star can be a physical thing that has water and trees and things on it at a higher dimension. Like if you were trying to think of an analogy for it, but like in a video game, let's say, if you I really don't know how to put it into words, but from what they say, a physical star in a higher dimension can be like a physical place in the lower dimension here, and that we just can't perceive it from where we're at like that.
No. I mean, I get it. Sherry, from the group, the co-founder of the group that we were, at the Skywatch at. Well, she has out of body experiences sometimes in her dreams. And one time she was on the sun, I think it was our sun, and she was interacting with beings that lived in the sun. Now that was in our 3D sun. I don't know if these were 3D creatures. I think these were not 3D creatures, but they were living on the sun, which is interesting. So if they can live on our sun, I have no doubt that there could be beings living on a higher dimensional representation or version of the sun, or aspect of the sun, or any sun.
Yeah, I guess if you think in terms of like, if everything is kind of formed out of light in a way, think of a holographic projection that's made physical in a higher dimension, like you can have the experience of physicality as long as, all of the parameters are agreeing to that.
So if you plant a tree on the sun in the seventh dimension, is it still getting its light from the sun?
I don't know. I think it is the light itself, essentially.
Okay. Maybe it doesn't need the sun at that point.
Probably not.
Okay. All right. That's fascinating, Nick, man. I would love to know what the heck is going on there. Okay. You said something about the pyramids, how you had learned about the pyramids from these beings. They hadn't told you a lot of information that, but they had told you some stuff that, as far as being practical to our world, they had told you some information about the pyramids.
Yeah. Let me pull it up just so I don't butcher it. So I asked them, let's see here. Pyramids. They had said that essentially that they said the pyramids. I asked them, can you describe the function of the pyramids? And this was before I knew who and what they were. Essentially, I was just like, man, if I have this direct line to this seemingly something that's way more intelligent than I am, I was always curious about the pyramids. I was like, yeah, what's up with those? And they said the pyramids were constructed to align humanity's consciousness by our direction and assistance. They're essential points that align and contribute to the stability of the holographic structure of the reality that you reside in and maintain positive vibration essential to the life frequency and the resonance that are essential for consciousness development. They are everywhere, and they are harnessing energy that you are all a part of.
Okay, I like that. I assume they're not working anymore. Is there any way to get them functional again?
So they did say that that system apparently had at one point been misused by, I guess, malevolent forces, or just, I don't know the extent of what that means. And also I want to say that I don't think that that's the only function of them either. I think they're very multi-purpose, but that was just the basic answer that they gave me. But from what I've inferred is that I think at one point in time, I was thinking about this earlier, that whenever a lot of those structures were functioning better, that the whole frequency of the earth was probably a bit higher, and thus making the frequency and like abilities and the consciousness of humans on earth at the time probably were resonating with that frequency as well, and probably contributed to some more potential abilities that we may have had back then. And also, like, if that a lot of that stuff was functioning at a higher rate, what happened to them after, say, some kind of cataclysmic events and things like that as well. So,
Well, that's fascinating. I had a guest on the other day who had remote viewed the pyramids and the Giza megastructure, and he was seeing, basically Atlanteans involved somehow in that, and they were very high functioning, high vibrating beings that lived hundreds of years, and that I'm imagining they were in touch with other beings. Dick Algire and Daz Smith did a remote viewing of the pyramids some years ago, and they were seeing exactly what you described, that there was a change of ownership, or a takeover of the pyramids, that a certain set of beings or faction of beings had some sort of hand or involvement in the construction of the pyramids. But then at a certain point, another group came in, maybe a hostile group, and took over. Which is exactly what they're saying. So it's really interesting to get this confirmation, or another set of corroborative information from your guides. That is
no,
just
that's
super
interesting.
super fascinating.
No, yeah, I love those are the dots that I draw like that. Hearing unrelated or unconnected sources saying the same thing is always where I tend to put my eggs in those baskets.
Yeah, and I've come across multiple corroborative information about beings on the sun, or even that the sun could be a portal. Yeah, I get that a lot. Or not a lot, but I've gotten that enough times to where I think there's probably something to it. Maybe you could go through the 3D sun and emerge on the 7D sun. I don't know. But I want to see some of these videos, some of these UFO videos. You've been able to bring these beings in, or these craft in, whatever they are. And sometimes you're able to get them on camera. Do you think we could see some of those right now?
Yeah, I've got a couple right here.
All right, Nick, can you tell us about this one?
Okay, so this one in particular, it's the only one we're able to get to work here, but I was outside with my wife, and I had a 76x telephoto zoom lens that I attached to my phone on a tripod, and it's zoomed in on the Pleiades constellation. So anybody who's looked up and seen it in the sky, you can see how relatively small it is, just to the naked eye. But this video is showing the entirety of the constellation in frame, without any really other stars around it. So I went outside. I was recording for not even 2 or 3 minutes, and just in my head, I was like basically talking to my guides essentially and asking them, I was like, it would be really cool if y'all could fly through the center of the Pleiades while I'm recording, because that, well, one, that's where y'all are from, and that would kind of prove the, I was like, what would make the point of this video like even more, make it more of a point? Like, if y'all could fly through exactly where I'm asking you to fly with where you're from in the background while I'm totally zoomed in on it. And that's exactly what they did.
That is amazing. I mean, if you had just gone out in the sky to, if you go out in the sky and try to find the Pleiades, it's like that tiny, right?
Yeah.
And to actually be able to zoom in on it, ask the beings to make an appearance there, and then to get this fantastic object. There's just kind of, modestly moving through the sky, not zipping through, but it's just moving at a relatively moderate pace through the sky, very clearly, very distinctly, right through the Pleiades, or right, between Nick and the Pleiades. Just an amazing capture. Something that, I think that would be almost impossible to reproduce. So yeah, awesome capture, Nick.
Yeah, and like those kinds of things happen. Like, I didn't go out there, ask them to do it, and then they're like, all right, be right back, we're about, just keep looking, kind of thing. But I did think it in my head, and I was putting that intention and asking them to do it, and then they did it. And there wasn't a, like, it wasn't like sit back and watch, but it's almost every time they do know what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, who I'm with, what we're wanting to see. And it seems, it's not like I'm, summoning them, or, like, it's more of a, we always just kind of ask or just expect, if you will, and they're always willing to oblige as much as they can. When I've had my meditations and conversations with them that are more in detail, where I'm actually, doing my recordings and whatnot, I'll ask them about some of the sightings that they have done for me and my friends and family and things like that. And, I'll say thank you, and they'll say, that you're welcome, and that we will always try to, if we're able to. And it seems to be almost always the case. Like, I'll get home from work, I'll get outside, and, it's dark, and I'll close my truck and look up, and there they are, just kind of saying hi, and then I'll walk inside. It's just like, hey, and it's just fun.
Now, are they always, the lights in the sky that we saw last time? Do you ever see any, clearly structured objects or anything like that?
The only thing that I saw, I saw like some sort of like trail of fire, like a chariot of fire, if you will, one time over a concert. And I didn't get any confirmation. Actually, I didn't ask specifically, but I had a feeling it was them, because typically, like meteors or anything, a meteor will burn out and then they'll go away. You can't see it at all. Rockets, they aren't typically going straight sideways, and they, are going in one direction. This thing, it lit up, it was fire, and then it stopped, and then the trail turned away, and then it was just a dot, and then the dot started going like up and down, left and right. It hung around for a while, and it was
Cool.
just, yeah, it was pretty wild. And that might be on that same Instagram as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, everybody go check out Nick's Instagram and see what you can find.
Yeah, there's links on the Collective Perspective is my podcast, will be the podcast, and I've got my link tree on there that goes to the Telegram. The Telegram has every video and every message, everything start to finish of my entire story, my entire, everything that's been happening since 2022, and every video that's worth posting is on there, and everything that they've ever told me for the past 3 years. But sorry, we couldn't get the ones to work. I don't know what's up with the other screen sharing.
That's all right. Yeah, people can search for it and find some of these themselves, hopefully. So how has this impacted your life, your day-to-day life? having this contact and these connections and having UFOs show up when you ask them to show up. Surely that's impacted your life in some way.
Yeah, it has. Man, at first it was like, what's wrong with you? Like there's got to be something wrong, but not all the way, but I don't know. Some people that I know on the religious side were concerned, you know, that if it's not God, then it's you know, you know how that can be sometimes. It's
if it's not God, it's the devil,
basically. And but I don't know. What was really interesting is actually with my mom. So from somebody who, you know, she birthed me, and telling her, I share the stories with her and the transcripts, and you know, I've been telling her about it pretty much since it started. We have a pretty open relationship, and like, you know, we're cool with each other, and I've been sharing it all with her, and she's like, well, and people that know me on a personal level, like, I know I have no reason to lie about this stuff, and even the content of the information, like, I don't know, some of it reads kind of like it's like scriptural, or it's like very wise, and like some of the words, I'm like, I don't even know that word, and it's coming out of my mouth, and like the way that they talk, and just knowing that it is coming from me, but it's not really. And just seeing that, you know, from people that know me and that have looked at it and have read it, it's like, well, there's really only a couple options for what's going on. It's either you believe me, you don't believe me, and if you do believe me, what are the implications of that? You know, and I'd have no reason to lie about it. So it's kind of forced at least some of the people that are close to me into like really picking an understanding, and opening their minds a little bit, and especially the amount of sightings that we get to see. Because like at the beginning, for me, it was, I didn't really have any kind of physical proof, or it was just me like, hey, I'm having this experience, and here's what they're saying, and here's everything that I'm documenting, and it's been the most profound and, you know, emotional awakening thing I've ever experienced, and I don't have anyone that understands really. And I asked them, I was like, yeah, this is it's funny because I talk to them now in a way, kind of, it's more like on a friend level, but halfway through it was like, whoa, this is the most mystical, like spiritual thing that I've ever encountered. But now we can like kind of joke, and it's more personal, which has been cool and fun. But I asked them if there's things that they could be doing to help some of the people around me, like, believe, or you know, just have their own kind of experiences. And the sightings, it's at the point now where my mom, my wife, all of my friends, they're all looking up, and they'll even see them before me sometimes now. They're like, hey, there they are.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, so it's like been a whole fun group thing now, because it's been happening so often. And like my friends' parents and stuff out at their lake house, they're like, wow, I've never seen anything like that. And it tends to only happen when I'm around, and not, you know, it's not just me, but it's I don't know, it's kind of spread that way. And the more people that have opened up about it have been experiencing their own things as well. And even a friend of mine, my best friend, actually, I was talking to him about some of this stuff, and just getting kind of deep and spiritual. And he had asked some questions, and I was just trying to explain some of the things about reality and life and things like that. And while I was talking to him, he like got real emotional, and like he stopped me from talking, and he was like, I don't know what's going on right now, but like I can either feel what you're feeling, or there's something that he felt like in his heart that was coming externally that he had never experienced before, kind of like the things that I had experienced, from what I can tell, that it was either his guides or my guides allowing him like a little bit of something that he's never felt, so that he would know what I'm talking about, and we'd be able to at least, like, it's something that's unexplainable. He experienced it. I know he experienced it, and I've experienced it too. And it was kind of like just for us, so that we could I don't know. He never forgot it, and he's like, I get it now, kind of thing. Ever since then, so that's been cool.
That's amazing, man. I love it. Now, when they come in, I noticed at the Skywatch that you were able to see them before everybody else was. Can you sense them? Or are you just really good at picking them out?
I think it's more of a really good at picking them out. Just I am definitely always looking up for sure. So I'm always looking for them anyway, because I'm more surprised to not see them than see them at this point. So yeah. I'm always looking. But I don't know. At the very least, it's just more of I don't sense like in the sense that like Chris Bledsoe is like, hey, they're coming at 8:59 and they're going to be right over there, kind of thing. Which is that's pretty impressive if it is like that. But it's not definitely not like that for me. It's more of a, hey, look up. I did have one thing where I was out in the desert in Tucson, and I went out to record some stuff, and I went out by myself, and I was recording over near Orion for like a good 5 minutes or so, and then I just heard in my head, turn around. And so I turned around, and sure enough, right there, right by the moon, they're flying right there, and they did some cool stuff, right, flying real slow and some zigzags and everything like that. So I heard turn around in my head, and I was like, but it sounded like me, but I just did it. I was like, okay, turn around. But it didn't even register at the time. It's so funny because some of the guidance that you get in your life, you don't even recognize that it's not coming from you. Right. Sometimes it sounds like you, it can feel like you sometimes, but a lot of it is not. And that's one thing that they've made a really hard point to me, is that understanding that you do have help, and that there is assistance, and that you're not alone, and everybody has guides, and it doesn't align with some people's belief systems and stuff. I understand that, but from my understanding and my perspective is that whether you think so or not, I'd be willing to bet that everybody has guides, and that they're there and they're helping from an unjudgmental place, and a lot of the positive reinforcement and the assistance, get out of the way or move or go that way, probably shouldn't do that, and everything that's positive definitely could be coming from them. And when you learn to recognize that, sometimes it can change your life, really.
I love it. And sometimes you can hitch a ride in a UFO with your guides. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right, I think that's probably a great place to end that on. That was beautiful, man. Where can people find you if they want to explore more?
Honestly, my Instagram would probably be the best. That has links to everything else. It's the collective perspective.podcast, which will be in the future more regular episodes of just stuff like this, and just whatever me and my wife decide we want to talk about. But that's a plan in the future, and that has the link to a link tree to the it'll say Pleiadian messages, and that'll take you directly to my Telegram. And if you scroll all the way to the top to the first post, I document everything start to finish on what I did and how I did it, and everything that happened between then and now. So
okay, awesome. Well, I hope you come back to the show, and thank you so much for joining us today, and I can't wait to go sky watching with you again.
For sure, can't wait.